how do you define freedom?
Freedom for me is I can do what I want, where I want, when I want, with whoever I want, for however long I want.
That's very free. It's a very, very good definition of freedom.
The drive that keeps me moving is a destination I have not yet hit. That destination is freedom. 15 years old, I got a job at the golf course. And my dad patted me on the back and said, "Good job, son. Now you can be like me and you can work till you're 65 and then retire." And I thought, like, you want me to work, spend 40 years doing something I don't want to be doing? And I thought that was the most ridiculous idea I ever had. And I said, that sounds nuts. Welcome to Transform with Jason Drees. I'm your host. On today's episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. I have a friend here, a colleague, client, coach, Lucas Mitchell, 35 years old, 2 kids, Phoenix, Arizona, knows a lot about hamburgers, knows a lot about integrating. Lucas has actually been around Jason Drees coaching for the past few years, and actually he is personally built most of the operational infrastructure of the business. And if you've ever heard me talk, he's probably one of 2 most amazing integrators I've ever met in my entire life. And I decided we were having a conversation the other day that was really good, and I decided it would be great to have Lucas be the host on this show. So we're going to flip it around today. Lucas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I'm so excited for this. This is going to be really fun. I feel like I get to just like poke the Jason Drees a little bit. We'll see what happens.
Poke the Jason Drees. Yeah. Do you want to share anything else about your bio? I'll say Lucas, he founded Nourish and So, which is a company that does operational support. They basically are my virtual operations team, hiring. He also runs a Five Guys hamburger franchise with how many locations now?
20 locations. Yeah.
20 locations. Yeah,
I will say that I'm couple states, bunch of employees.
12 states. I do love In-N-Out Burger, but I will eat Five Guys, So I respect the burger.
I'm not gonna lie. I like In-N-Out once in a while myself too. So there's no judgment there. A hamburger is a hamburger, man. It's always
hamburger is a hamburger. Well, don't tell everybody in Texas that I've never been to Whataburger though. So,
I think we can both agree there. I'm not a Whataburger fan either, but
so let's dive in, Mr. Host.
Yeah, this is gonna be cool. This is gonna be so cool. I thought, normally, Jason, when I hear you on other people's podcasts or even on your own podcast, we're always just talking about what you do, right? And I feel like it's so crucial, so important for other people. But I had a couple ideas today I thought would be cool. I thought one thing that would be really cool is just to figure out who is Jason Drees, the person, like kind of take the mask off a little bit. Not that you have one. It's funny because honestly, what people will probably see in this episode is you just are Jason Drees as we see you all the time. But it's kind of fun to like pretend like we're taking off some big mask, right?
Yeah, so, let's take off the mask and see what's there. That sounds fun. Make me squirm over there.
So, I mean, Jason, I think people know your background, know your bio, know you've come through sales, tech sales, had your own, car or car driver suit cooling company, whatever you want to call that. And, everybody kind of, I think at this point has heard those stories. But who is Jason? What are your hobbies? How do you spend your time? What, you've got a family, obviously, beautiful kids. What's your drive? What drives you to get up and work every single day as hard as you work to help other entrepreneurs? And we'll just kind of see where this takes us.
I like that question. The drive that keeps me moving is a destination I have not yet hit. And that destination is freedom. That's what drives me. I remember when I got my first job 15 years old, I got a job at the golf course, and my dad patted me on the back and said, "Good job, son. Now you can be like me and you can work till you're 65 and then retire." And I thought, you want me to work, spend 40 years doing something I don't want to be doing? And I thought that was the most ridiculous idea I ever had. And I said, that sounds fucking nuts. So I've been, in 2003, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that either ignited my entrepreneurial spirit or made me crazy, one of the two, a little of both, actually. But what drives me right now is a state of freedom and providing for my family. We live in Austin, Texas, which is not inexpensive. My boys go to private school. We're really lucky to have 2 of my boys who are dyslexic go to a really amazing dyslexic private school. So expenses are higher than I would prefer, but it's the drive is providing for the family. and my desire for freedom is at the foundation of all of that.
And I guess, like, how do you define freedom, right? Like, that's a great drive, but from my perspective, like, I could view freedom differently than you could, right? So what does that look like for you? What's freedom? What would you do?
Freedom for me is I can do what I want, where I want, when I want, with whoever I want, for however long I want.
That's very free. It's a very, very good definition of freedom.
I've had that definition for probably 15 years.
When I think about that definition, I get like, honestly, this is interesting. It's a little scary. That definition of freedom.
Really?
I don't know what I would do, right? With all of, like, I think right now I feel like I have a lot of freedom. I would not say I have that definition of freedom. But there's a part of me that maybe that definition is a little bit scary. Do you know what you would do? Or like, why does that not intimidate you? That idea of just complete autonomy of everything, essentially, is how I heard you define it.
The first thing I would do is rest. I cannot remember the last time that I've rested in a decade. It's been a pursuit. Becoming a coach was incredibly financially challenging. It started about a little over 10 years ago. So like the first 5 years of that was incredibly challenging. So it was all consuming. And I can't remember the last time I had nothing to do. So I actually look forward to a point where I have nothing to do.
I mean, that's pretty exciting, right? I don't know, like, I guess I'm like a little bit different in that I have small breaks. Like, I feel like I'm very cyclical, right? Like I grind really hard and I drive really hard, and that's like, and then I like decompress and I don't do anything for a few months. And then I'm like, go drive. Maybe not anything's a strong word, but like I don't do a lot of anything. And so interesting to hear, like, the first thing you do is rest. I think most people, when they hear the definition of freedom, you'd hear like, well, I'm going to go to Cabo and I'm going to party on a yacht with a bunch of people and whatever, like they'd have like some crazy definition. And you're just like, Jason's going to take some downtime.
Take some downtime, right? I've been in it for quite a while, in business we were in it. And when business started taking off, then I was in it with the family. The past 18 months in business has been really hard, so it's all hands on deck right now. It's almost just like it's whatever it takes happens. So I have the highest workload of anybody in the company right now, so it's really that. But what I do have passions, right? If once I rested for a while, I think what I've always been such a conduit for information that just kind of flows through me. I look forward to the space to allow more of that to flow, because so much comes out of me. And being at a couple $1 million run rate with 15 employees is a hard place to be for a business owner. And especially when you're not a business operator, I'd say I look back over the past 18 months and I see how much burnout I had. And I'm starting to come out of that because of the CEO I hired last month. It's starting to come out of it, but I realize like I've lost my spark over like the past 18 months. So right now I'm kind of focused on getting that spark back and getting that creative back. I've really been enjoying like Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, about the artistry and what we do. So that kind of inspires me, the work, because I know there's more content that's going to come out. So having more space to just create sounds really exciting. I'd also do more off-road trips in Baja, because that's probably my greatest passion.
That's fun. That's so fun. So rest and Baja trips, essentially, like, family, rest, Baja trips. That's like Jason Dree's perfect life, right?
Yeah, and if Tool is on touring in concert, I would go follow them around and go to all their shows. That too.
You have been to a lot of Tool concerts. I know this from when we were working together. Like, I felt like you were just like, you followed Tool around for a while, right? Already once.
Yeah, I've seen them 10 times in the past 2 years. Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever seen a single band more than twice. So 10 times in 2 years. It's a super fan.
Super fan. The first time
you got to get on the bus with them or whatever they're riding these days.
You got to get on the bus. Yeah, we got in the bus. Last time in 2 years ago, we saw them in San Antonio, and then me and Dash followed them around. We went to like Omaha and then Nebraska and then Kansas City and then Moline, Illinois. We saw them 5 times. And then About a month ago, we saw him in Austin, then Dallas, and Oklahoma City. So me and my oldest son Dash road trip to see him. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. My kids are 7 and 4, and I'm starting to now like figure out the hobby, like the things that we like to do together. Like, before this, it's always been kind of like I've tried to work really hard to learn to like the things that they like, as a way to kind of like have commonality. And now, especially my 7-year-old is getting old enough to where we're starting to figure out the things that we mutually like together. Like I like them and she likes them and we can do them together. So that's cool. Like I dream, maybe it's not a Tool concert road trip one day, but I think that's probably a big part of freedom for me is like, what am I going to do with my daughter one day? That's just going to be kind of like our thing that we do. So that's very cool.
Yeah. I wish all my sons liked Tool, but only my oldest does right now.
Well, it's nice to have things too. I think when you have multiple kids, it's nice to have things in common with them individually too, because then it gives you opportunity to spend one time versus like if you all like the same thing all the time, everyone's always going to want to participate in everything.
True.
Right. I don't know. It seems kind of cool.
Yeah,
you said something interesting when we were talking about, kind of we talked about you getting to freedom. Is this kind of like the ultimate goal and you don't feel like you've gotten that yet? And you said something interesting during that discussion that I want to dive into a little bit, because I feel like you can be a real voice of reason here. And the reason I say that is because I know you personally, and I see you on social media, and I know a ton of your content inside and out. And I think a lot of people could look at you on social media and think that what you're saying is, everyone can do this. It's easy. You should be a business owner. All you have to do is shift frames, right? Like that's it. You just shift frames and it all happens magically, right? Like somebody could gather that persona just from seeing clips of you, right?
Yeah.
And so hearing you say business is hard is interesting. One of the things that I preach a lot is like business ownership is very hard. And like it's not for everybody. And we should probably look at social media and the people that we're following on social media, the content we're consuming that makes it seem easy, and take that with a grain of salt and really try to understand what it means to be a business owner, entrepreneur. So maybe you can, take off the like, or maybe it is part of it is shifting frames. I know that personally. That's been a huge part of my journey. But maybe you can enlighten us a little. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, do you just shift frames and it's easy, or what do you mean when you say business is hard? Right? What does that mean? What should people know about being an entrepreneur or a business owner or a real estate investor that maybe they don't know?
Business is hard because you're not an expert in every area of business. And that's probably the biggest challenge, right? Is trying to run the business in a way. And then there's times where you're getting lessons where if I knew what I knew now 2 years ago, I would have done things differently, right? But when you start to be successful and the business starts to take off, there's a buzz and all this stuff. So you kind of act a certain way. But it's also a personal growth journey as well. And I think for most people it is right now. So the hard thing is, one of the hardest things for me personally is that my personal growth is intimately wrapped into the business. And also I'm the brand. So there's a content machine. It's not like I'm a real estate investor and I'm not the issue. So being the brand is hard because there's a lot involved in the being comfortable with you're being visible and all the stuff that's out there. Right. So that's a part of it as well. But it's also hard because I can also think that when things aren't going well, I'm the problem because I'm emotionally not feeling the right way. I'm actually an extremely emotional person, which makes me very passionate and powerful. And that's one of the reasons I can coach so well. But it's also my biggest liability because I'm not level-headed and I don't make sound decisions in business a lot of time because I'm so emotional. So that's the hardest thing. And then there's also life. There's a path that you're on in life that you don't really know until you discover it. And sometimes you can force things and sometimes you can't. And I've been finding for a lot of my growth over the past few years is you can't force it. You can't force it. You can't force it. It feels like there's certain time frames on things and there's nothing I can do to force it or phase it. So, cash management is hard as a business owner. But at the same time, if I wouldn't be an entrepreneur, I never would have been able to put my kids in the school that they're in, because basically my tuition school last year was like my old salary. I'm a W-2. But at the same time, I still do believe that everybody could be an entrepreneur, because I also believe that, everybody, there's 8 billion people, 7 billion people on the planet right now. We're not designed to be clones of each other. We're all just meant to be unique. And there is a handful of people that want to be a dentist or a lawyer, but everybody has a unique message. And while business is hard, it is, being in a crappy W-2 job is also hard. So it's having an average salary, like trying to pay, grocery bills on a $70K salary right now has got to be really hard. So I believe that everybody has untapped potential within them. And, it's just because I'm the brand and I'm the content machine and I'm the face of the company and I have a CEO that's transitioning in. It's just a lot right now to do all of those things effectively. It's hard. So the physical demands and the mental demands are difficult during this phase. And a lot of times we go through phases where a downturn comes up, and the downturn, of course, is not wanted and is painful, but yet the downturn leads to an evolution in thinking that's going to put you back on that higher level growth path anyway, that wouldn't have happened if you didn't have the downturn. So, and this is like, I'm going through like the second time I've been through that in like the past 24 months.
Yeah. It's so good. What you're saying right now is essentially the journey I think every entrepreneur goes through of, there's these really high highs, really low lows, and there's everything in between there. And I could say the same thing. The most growth I've had as an individual has come as a business person, right? Like, recently, or has come from being in business. Like recently, my most personal growth in my family life, my personal life, only happened because I was a business owner. Like it wouldn't have happened had I not been a business, had nothing to do with business, but had everything to do with family and personal growth. But because the business put me in certain situations, I was forced to go through growth in other areas of my life. And so, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think, you said, I was going to ask you the question about other people, which you kind of alluded to. You think everybody can be an entrepreneur. Do you think, everybody obviously, I think you believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that everybody has their own purpose, right? Everybody has a purpose. And the idea is to align with that purpose. And that's where you're going to see the most growth, the most, opportunity in your life is when you're aligned with your purpose. Do you think then everybody's purpose is to be a creator and an entrepreneur and they just haven't found it yet? Or is there some variation of that? Maybe it's not time yet on their journey for that part of their life, or how does that kind of play into this whole thing?
That's a good question, right? Because there's certain people who are conduits and there's certain people that aren't. And one of the most interesting experiences I've had is I was at a coach training. We did an event like 2 years ago, and I brought all the coaches there, and I've been coaching this new methodology, and we're sitting there in the room. So I'm sitting there. We did the 3-day event, and then we had a day coach training because the coaches were relatively new. They came from like a Robbins coaching background, and the goal was to teach them alignment coaching, which I was still uncovering how to do. And it was a very interesting experience to me to be sitting in a room with a dozen coaches who 80% of them have more coaching experience than I do. They've been coaching longer than I have. And when we're doing some coaching exercises, I was the only one who could see the answer. And it was a very interesting experience. And it was just very clear to me that, and it's been always clear, and somebody actually gave me, a guy named Bo Hawkins, who's a social media coach who works with Evan Carmichael. He's pretty amazing. And he actually said the word when we were talking. He's like, you're a conduit, right? There's a flow of information that goes through me. And there's other coaches on my team who are brilliant coaches, but they're not content conduits, right? Like Andrew Devlin, for example, one of the best coaches I've ever met. He's an amazing model of being a man, of being a husband, of being a great human, of being an entrepreneur. So his role is a little bit different than mine, but I think he impacts people as much as I do. So I think we all have the ability we're all supposed to impact people. It just, some people, the impact is more visible than others. And sometimes the impact is related to business and making money. And sometimes it's not at all. what really impacts people the most is like authenticity and self-alignment and self-love. So when you get on that path of your own passion, like following your own passion, like I did, is really hard to do because I had everybody against me. You know, even my wife was skeptical at the time. You know, I had my brother-in-law call me one day and tell me he's going to raise my family because I'm a deadbeat, you know? So it's because people just don't understand when you're on a journey that there's a purpose you're supposed to serve. No one can really understand that journey except for you. And I think it screams louder for some people than others. Some people have different lessons in this lifetime to learn. But for me, it was clearly that path. And I feel that my personal ownership in stepping into my abilities and my skill set and my ability to create content and influence people is my ability to step into that is directly tied to my financial success. When I'm not stepping into it, it goes down. When I'm stepping into it, it goes up. It's so intertwined. It's ridiculous. It's like, I wish it was different so much, you know? And then I've had so many people tell me like, oh my God, Jason, you're supposed to be this big and you're supposed to be this big. So that's all wrapped up in my head. And I'm trying to just do my day to day as best I can. So I don't know if other people are like this, but my journey has been very interesting being this person, being the guy.
That's super interesting. Like I saw this thing on Twitter the other day. It's a very dangerous place, by the way. Be careful on Twitter. I guess it's called X now anyway. So I keep calling it Twitter for purposes here. Twitter is X, just so everyone's aware. I'm never going to change. So I saw this thing on Twitter the other day, and this guy basically posted, you know, it was an engagement bait tweet. And he's like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, like go all in, be an entrepreneur, like quit your job and go be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, stop talking about it, basically. And the dude's just getting blasted on Twitter by like all these people inserting their logic and reason into like, well, here's how you methodically do it, right? And it kind of goes along with what we're talking about here of like, for me, what the guy said, it aligns perfectly. That's how I am. Like, if I'm going to do something, it's all in. Like, we're either doing it or we're not. We're not talking about it. We're not dancing around it. We're not tiptoeing around it. But for other people, I say that and they look at me like I'm crazy, you know? And so I guess kind of what I hear you saying is like, that might be part of people's own uniqueness and their own unique journey, and they have to do it a different way. And maybe there's not necessarily a right and a wrong, but I'm curious, you know, if you saw that tweet, what's Jason Drees' instant reaction to it? If you see somebody say, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, go all in, quit your job, go do it. What's Jason Drees' instant reaction without thought?
Oh, well, 100%. I'd agree with him. Like, go for it. Right. And the feedback he's getting is the best example of being an entrepreneur. Because when you start to do your own thing, you're going to be criticized and ridiculed and judged. And it's when those early stages, and this is why I always talk about climbing your mountain, right? Because everybody's going to climb their own mountain. When you start following your own path and doing what you want, the people around you aren't going to understand. And that's when you want it so bad. You want the support and acknowledgement. That's not when you get it. And then you do something amazing and you celebrate and you look around and no one sees you and you're like, oh my God, that was awesome. And you get so it was so exciting and you can't think of settling. So you do it again and you finally start to ignore the fact that nobody is actually giving you any attention. And then you start to give yourself the attention and then you have more success. And then you finally start to realize you don't need anyone else's input anymore. And that's when you start to get everyone's acknowledgement, when you no longer need it. And I've seen it over and over again.
I've experienced that myself. So true.
So true. So that person getting that hate right there that's the system, the conditioning of everybody challenging someone who's stepping into their greatness because everyone else is too afraid to.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I've experienced the same exact thing you're talking about. You know, people look at you like you're crazy. And then you get to a point where people don't understand anymore. Like, you know, like they want to acknowledge you, but they don't really even know how. And there's like this gap and this distance, right? That you feel sometimes it's people closest to you too, where it's just like you start feeling this huge gap. They don't even know like how to interact with you anymore, how to celebrate you, because it's just so foreign to anything that's seems normal to them. And so, yeah, I love the way you said that. And I love the instant reaction too. It's like, that was mine too. I almost bit on the tweet and like dove in, and those things normally don't get me, but I was like a second away from like, oh, I'm jumping in here with this guy. Like I'm riding to the top of the mountain with him. Like, let's go for it. So I love the instant reaction. It's great.
Yeah.
So I guess then go ahead.
I was just saying it's often the ones closest to us who will never understand us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I think what's interesting too is from a personal perspective, when you're going through that process of building something and doing something, what I've experienced at least is like you recognize how hard it is and what you're doing in those moments. But when you look back, it seems like that's just what you do. Like when people will say to me like, wait, you've built this big company of Five Guys franchises and you have another company and how do you run all this stuff? And that's incredible. And that's amazing. I don't know what to say because I'm just like, that's just like what I'm supposed to be doing. It's just who I am. Like it's nothing special to other people. All of a sudden they view it as unique and special. I don't even know how to respond to that because that's just my calling. Like I'm just doing what I was born to do. Just like you're doing what you feel like you were born to do. They're just different things.
Yeah. Well, like that's the best example I give you for new entrepreneurs, right? Like it comes so naturally to you, you almost think it has no value. Right. And people ask me, how do you coach like that? I'm like, yep. I don't know. Like it was actually a serious problem. Like when JDC started, I was coaching in a radically different way than all the other methodologies, and trying to teach that to other people was like, we didn't know how to do that. So it took years to kind of break that down. But for new entrepreneurs,
I remember that too. I was a part of that.
You were a part of that. Yeah. So for new entrepreneurs, what I say to them is like, what are you so naturally good at that you help everybody, but you think is not worth any value? That's actually what should be your business. That's your business.
So what would you say to new entrepreneurs who feel like they're following their calling, but they just feel like so stuck? Like, as an example, CPA, trained professional, lots of schooling, whatever, to be their profession. They're like, I actually love what I do. I just don't want to do it for somebody else. I want to control my time. I want to control my business. I'm going to go off on my own and do it. And they start their own business and they're just like exactly what you and I have experienced, right? Just like going through the absolute ringer, and understand that being a CPA for somebody else's firm is very different than running your own firm, right? What would you say to that person who's like, they might feel, and I've actually heard people say in that moment, like, maybe I'm just not supposed to be an entrepreneur. Maybe I'm just supposed to work for somebody else. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would like more information actually than just that question, than just they're struggling. But like, it's, a lot of times becoming an entrepreneur is getting your expectations correct. And most people are thinking too small. And I'd really be like, well, what are you after? Because maybe all they're after is replacing their income and working less time. Like that's not that hard to do. But I would also say that the first 2 years of business is very hard, right? And you're going to need a breakthrough of some sort to get marketing and things like that. So I almost need more. I would probably ask more questions on that one before I give more specific answer. Because I could go so many different ways.
I like to give you just little tidbits. Yeah, little tidbits, and then we'll see what you say.
Because that question doesn't give me enough to know where their misalignment is.
For me, like when I hear somebody say that, and then I hear you say like, well, they're probably not thinking big enough. That aligns perfectly for me, right? Because part of the excitement of being an entrepreneur is going after something big. If all I wanted was to not work for somebody else and have control over my time, I don't think there's enough motivation in that to keep me going. Does that make sense? Like, I don't think there's enough excitement built around that end goal for me to want to go through the actual ringer that is entrepreneurship. Because it is, right? There has to be like, oh, I'm, but building a huge restaurant company and at some point having a huge exit or having an employee buy me out and impacting hundreds of lives and making a huge difference in the world, that's all super exciting. And so when I get a letter from a lawyer that I'm being sued, or, cash flow's really tight 1 month or whatever happens, I have this like big, but I'm doing it because of this. I'm doing it because of this. And so it's easier to push through. And maybe that's part of it. I guess there's not really a question there, but would you agree with that the bigger target helps keep people motivated in those times of difficulty?
Well, it's bigger target or really just commitment to the target, right? There's a commitment there. Like, so one thing you've probably heard me say lots of times, I don't do goal setting. You've probably heard me say this lots of time. I don't set goals. I don't have written goals or anything like that. And I used to always say that. And Alexis, my wife, was one day saying to me, she heard me say that. And she said, "What are you talking about?" She says, you have more clarity in your goals than anyone I've ever met in my life. And then I started to reflect on what she says. And the reason I don't write down goals is because they're not goals. They're new realities that just haven't happened yet. Like, I hold them with such certainty and conviction that whatever happens in the middle doesn't matter. Now, there are going to be times when I'm having struggles or I'm challenged and I feel out of alignment. I don't feel that. But at the end of the day, eventually I always come back to that. That's my end result there. And so an entrepreneur at that level, like, if you're going to, like, that's why when people say they want to start coaching to get help with the entrepreneur, I'm like, no, you need to make a decision. You're going to be successful before you hire the coach. That's the problem there. So it's that dedication to the end result. And the end result doesn't actually have to be that specific. It could just literally be, I want to make more money and have more free time. It could be that simple. Because as we're starting the entrepreneur journey, the other advice I always give new entrepreneurs is that it's always going to pivot into something else. So you got to be open, because you could think it's going to be a welding business, but in fact, it turns into a boat trailer business, right? So we don't know. Like, if there's excitement and passion where you're going in that direction, that's life talking to you. And then life has a plan. The key is to following those pivots that life gives you, so you can take advantage of the opportunities and take advantage of help from other people. Because for the longest time, that was a piece that I was unknowingly blocking, was help from other people.
Yeah, that's definitely a key too. That's super, super good point of like, and not only that, but like when you're in the trenches and you're kind of going through some of those difficulties that every new entrepreneur is going to go through, it's very easy to like block out whether it's help from other people, whether it's the perfect book for the situation you're in, whatever. Life has these very subtle ways of trying to tell you which direction you're supposed to go. And it's very hard. I think that's kind of where coaching was most impactful for me, was it's very hard to see those things when you're in the trenches and you feel like, you're just trying to dig yourself out of this huge hole you've created for yourself. You can't see all the other opportunities that are around you. And that's one of the biggest things coaching has done for me, is like, hey, just take, we've got a 60-minute call today. Let's take those 60 minutes and let's just come out of the trenches and let's just look around. Like, that's kind of how I view it now. Like, let's just explore what else there is. Let's come out of like, yeah, your check bounced for payroll yesterday. Cool story. Sorry, it sucks. Being an entrepreneur is hard. You'll figure it out. Let's come out of there for a second. And let's just look around, let's just see what else there is. And that's kind of like how I think of coaching now, is like, it's just like, it's almost like this just opens your peripheral vision, or whatever we want to call it. Maybe you're not looking right straight ahead. You're looking 360 degrees or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's the big thing. It's right. It's the unknown versus unknown targets, right? So, because everybody's brain is cataloging all their experience, and your experience is great in the known, but your experience is a handicap in the unknown. So most pivots in entrepreneur coaching comes from seeing things they're not seeing. And that's why coaching is such a powerful tool.
If you had to name one coach that's had maybe this is an unfair question. Right now, where you are in your life, looking backwards, did you have a coach that had the biggest impact on your life? And why'd they have such a big impact?
Well, of course, the biggest was Tony Robbins, of course. Like, he started all of this, from listening to Personal Power in 2000, 2001, going to UPW. So that was kind of what kind of got my attention around the whole coaching industry. And then after that, it was probably, it's been multiple coaches really. So during different phases, because at the Tony Robbins phase, it was my first coach there, Michael Savage, who had the most impact. He was the one that asked me the question, have you ever thought about becoming a coach? And that was that. You've heard that whole story there. And then after that, it's, there was Gabriel Patrick is the one who asked me the question and had the dog food story. And the dog food story created that big transformation in me after that, when I was a number one coach for 6 months after that call. So, and then after that, it was mentors, and probably over the past few years, it's probably been Andrew Devlin.
It's cool. I love Andrew. Andrew's such an awesome person. Such an awesome.
He's an amazing human being.
What impact has not being a coach but being coached by others had on your family?
Say that one more time. What
impact has it been like? Yeah, not being a coach yourself. Obviously, like I think we all know how being a coach has impacted your family. You're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're busy, lots of calls. Just like any other entrepreneur, I think everyone can kind of understand how that impacts your life. But being coached by others, have you had coaches that have made an impact on your personal and family life? And not just business. I feel like it's really easy to find, I guess, define where it's helped us in business and career. It's harder to pinpoint how it's impacted us in family and personal.
A lot of it was both impact, right? I think Andrew Devlin probably had the biggest impact on me coaching on my personal life. And I've had one-on-one coaching sessions from most of the coaches on my team at some point, because most of the coaches on my team all have specialties and they all have modalities. The other thing, the question I heard you start to ask was like, that I think I should answer is what impact has being a coach? Because I think what you actually said was the impact of being an entrepreneur is clear on my family, but there's actually a very specific impact as being a coach. Like there's a downside to being a professional coach. And I don't know if it's, and some other coaches have expressed this too, but historically I'm an extrovert, but at work I talk so much that when I'm in weekends and when I'm in social situations, I often appear like an introvert because I'm talked out. So I often appear that way. The other thing is that being a professional coach brings a hyper awareness to issues about everything. Hypersensitive to issues everywhere. And my first 5 years of a coach was me controlling myself, not trying to coach everybody because I wanted to coach everybody. And then the other thing is that it's very lonely as a professional coach, because most times I have business conversations, coaching comes up, and then I become the coach. And there's times when you don't want to hang out with your coach. So like I'm in the community in Austin where there's like the biggest GoBundance community that there is. And yet I am not invited to things and I'm left out of things, because they're going out to have fun or they're the coach. And there's times where you'll have a relationship with somebody and it was great. And then they disappear and they just ghost you for like 2 years. And you're like, what happened? They're like, oh, I wasn't owning my shit. So anytime anybody who has any form of coaching relationship with you isn't doing what they think they should be doing, they ignore you. So it's being a professional coach is kind of it's a lonely space to be.
I mean, entrepreneurship in general can feel really lonely. Hearing you talk about being a coach, I can honestly relate to that of just like, it's hard. Like even sometimes when I had, scheduled coaching calls, there are some times when it's like, oh, I really don't want to have this call tomorrow. Like I'm gonna have to own this thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, am I ready to bring this up and have this conversation or talk through this thing or whatever? So I could definitely relate to like the whole,
you may have had a time too where you didn't want to talk to me because either, right? So because our relationship started with I was your coach, right? That's how it started.
Yeah. No, so interesting. I mean, I know we probably got to start wrapping this thing up, but I think it's just cool to see insight into how you think as a person, how you think as an individual. I think we talked through some things that can help other people. What are you most focused on? Like, what impact are you trying to make right now? Not necessarily, long-term, forever. Maybe it is the same, maybe it's not. But right now at Jason Drees Coaching and you as a person, where are you focused on making your impact right now? Who are you mostly trying to help?
I think and that's been one of the challenges is identifying my target audience because there's so many audiences it applies to. So it's really the people that I love to help are those that are chasing greatness. Those that I also love to help are those that are stuck Like those people that are stuck, those people that are in the W-2 job, they would love to be an entrepreneur. They just have no idea how to do it. And they feel trapped and they got a shitty boss and a terrible job with an average salary. Like I love helping liberate those people. One of my biggest focuses right now is trying to get the world to be able to hear me, because I think that's been one of my biggest obstacles in marketing for as long as I've been a coach, because the content that I do is not the same as when I record a social media video. There's like a big gap there. So trying to put my content out in a way that can people hear it so it can be accessible to more people is one of my biggest goals right now, because I feel like I'm the best kept secret that nobody knows about, you know? So that's a big focus area there is getting the message more out there. And there's always this authenticity piece, right? And when you're the brand and you're the content, it's easy to go into the salesman, the branding guy versus the authenticity, and learning to be authentic is a journey. Cause I used to think that honesty was authenticity, but it's not. You know, it's authentically is being me. And the interesting thing is some of the work that I'm doing with Bo Hawkins right now is like understanding the person I need to be is the person I already am. And it's basically, if you had taken the CEO role out of my life for the past 2 years, that's who I was. But then when I became a CEO, I kind of lost track of that. So it's almost like this getting back to who I am right now. So that's my goal, is really focused on getting my message clear so that I can help more people. But I love helping everybody. I love coaching people. And the reason I love coaching so much is because it's a form of mastery to me. And I love operating in mastery. That's kind of my magic that drives me.
Well, I honestly, I feel like that's perfectly said. Just, my own experience working with you, Jason, has been phenomenal. I will say, like, what you say about just truly wanting to help people who are stuck and help them find their own genius and who they need to be. Like, I've experienced that myself. It's been amazing to be a part of your journey, even in a small way. And even just as a client was just an amazing experience. And, I hope to continue to see you, like, grab onto that genius and get out to the world. Cause I think it's a message that a lot of people need to hear, and they need to hear it as bluntly as you're willing to say it. And there's not a lot of people who are willing to say it that way. So, really appreciate that authenticity and just who you are as a person, and being a part of your life and a part of your journey. And thanks for having me today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. It was great to connect today, Lucas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, you should follow Lucas if you want. He's an amazing entrepreneur, amazing integrator. He's one of my mentors, one of my best friends, and I am grateful you're here today. And that's all for today. If you want to get an experience of coaching, go to freeintrosession.com, and I will see you on the next week's episode. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.